Welcome back. This is Module 4, Database and the Internet, and the Topic 4, PHP and MySQL Part 1. So I divided the topic about PHP and MySQL in two parts, and this is the first part. So far, if we recall what we have studied in this module, we talked about HTML as a kind of presentation language, so you can design your web pages with the different colors or using tables and using some different formats. You can design it. That's the main role of HTML. And also we learned about PHP. So PHP is a programming. So not just a static web page, you can add some dynamic functions and logics using PHP. So we can combine HTML and PHP. So based on what we have learned so far, now we can move on to the a little bit more advanced level of web programming, that is developing a web application using a database. So to use the database, we are going to integrate PHP into HTML. So let's see. So how to make a program that use database? Just simply remember three key steps. First one, you create a connection. Second, execute your SQL statement. Third, after your job is done, close the connection. It is very similar to making a phone call to your friend. So when you make a phone call, what do? You enter a phone number, and if you click the send button, you have a line connection between your cell phone with your friend's phone. This step is a creation of your own connection. After you created your own connection, you can talk with your friends. Similarly, in your web application, you can talk with your database. So what this talk means in our programming perspective, this means we have some jobs, and this job and tasks are related with SQL execution. So we can run any SQL statement like shown here. For example, select a statement, and we can execute it using some specific functions that's embedded in your PHP code. And after you execute your SQL statement, so after you do something with your database, now you can free your resources. That's the last step, closing the connection. Now let's start with WinSCP. So I will skip how to log in WinSCP, but after you log in, you will see your public HTML folder. So let me double check. So under root, home directory, and your last name folder, and under your last name, you may have public HTML already. So let's click it. So in previous topics, we created M4T1, T2, T3 folder, and inside public HTML. So double check here inside the public HTML. Let's create a new folder by right click. So here right click and new and directory. So let's name it as M4T4. So now we have M4T4 subdirectory, and let's double click M4T4. So this is our working directory for topic 4. So in topic 4, we are using database. So first, let's record the steps. We need to make a connection to the database since we need to communicate. And the second, we will execute some SQL statements. And the third, we will close the connection. So first, let's create a PHP file. So right click, new file, and this PHP file we will use it to make a connection. So let's name it as connection.php. Okay, so in this editor, we will add some PHP code. So the PHP code start with $PHP, and then let's close it first. And here, let me add some comment. So I will make a connection. So how to make a connection? We are going to call a function. So let me write down the function name first. So here we will call the connection function. And what's the name? This is MySQL I underbar connected. That is the function. So this function needs some parameters, so some information. Let me close it first. And what do we need? Actually, there are 4 parameters: server name, username, and password, and the database name. So before we call this function, let me leave it here. But now let's add some parameter by declaring some variables. So here, let me set some parameters for which function? For MySQL connect function. So what information do we need? First one is server information. So we will assign some value. Next one is, let's say, username, and we will save it in the variable name called user. So I will assign some values here. And the third parameter is password. So let me use pass as a variable name. The last one is, after you connect to a database, in our database server, there are many databases. So each user has its own database. Therefore, we have to choose one particular database by specifying the database name. So the database name will be saved in db name variable. Now, let's assign some values. First, server. So in general, you have to write down full URL address. In our case, it is very interesting because we own one server called the Valhalla server. And in this server, in the same machine, we are running this PHP program, but at the same time, we are running database server as well. So actually, we are using same machine for database server. So the database server is located in the same machine or same URL address. Many times in enterprise level, you may run many different databases. In that case, database may not be located in the same server or same machine, but it may be located in different machines. In that case, you have to indicate the IP address or URL address here. Since we are in special situation, like using a same machine, in that case, the keyword you can use for the server name instead of a complex IP address, you can say it's case sensitive, so or lowercase, you can say local host. So that is the name of server when you use same machine for both applications like a PHP engine and your database. Now, what's the username? Username is your last name. So in my case, CHA, but you have to write down your own last name. Remember, the first letter is uppercase, and or we are entering here. The information is case sensitive. Password. So what's the password when you access the database? Same user and the same password when you use PHP myadmin. So password is Info386 686 at your student's ID. So I will type XXX, but you need to type your student's ID 7 digits. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and this part must be your student's ID. Okay, now database name. So what is the database name? Actually, I assign the same name as the username or your last name. So in my case, it's a CHA, but again, you have to type your last name as a database name. Okay, so these are information we need to provide when we use this function called MySQL iConnect function. So how can we provide this information? Now, first parameter of this function is server name. So you can write down, for example, like local host, like here. However, it's not very good idea because if you change your server location, you have to update this information whenever you call some functions that use this as a parameter. Instead of this, we already have some variables here and we assign those values. So what is a better way? Instead of hard typing your parameter, you can just say server name. So server as a variable. By doing this, later, even when there is change in your server location, you don't have to fix this function part, but you may want to update the value of server here just once. Does it make sense? Yes. Now, second, user. So again, instead of typing your username directly, you can use your variable you have declared here instead of your real username. Okay, now password. We already assigned this in pass variable, so pass. And the last one is database name. So let's add the DB name. So if there is any extra spaces, it may be ignored, so it doesn't matter, but let me just delete here. So by running this function, actually you are trying to make a connection. Okay? So if you create a connection, that's it? No. When we talked about PHP functions, function will run with some parameters, but at the same time, many times you will get the return value, right? Like adding function, you can add two numbers, then the result of sum will be returned after you call that function. So similarly here, after you make a connection by calling this function, you can get the return value. This return value will keep the status of your current connection. So how can we keep that return value or status of your current connection? We can use another variable. So let's say it's a con. I just name it as a con. You can use some different name, but I will assign the result of this function MySQL iConnect in this variable. Then this variable will keep all the information about your current connection. This connection may include not only server name or whether status is successful or failure. Some other additional information can be also packaged. So we can say that this is not just a simple text value or numeric value. We can say that this is a connection object that encapsulates all the information related with our current connection. Okay, so far it's not that difficult, right? So if you create a connection and if you keep the current status, the connection is guaranteed. In other words, is this connection always successful? Mostly it may be true. However, sometimes it may not be successful. Like you could enter wrong password or wrong username as well, right? So it's a good idea to check the connection after you tried. So it's a kind of debugging. Double check whether it was successful. How can we do that? We talked about conditional statements. Conditional statements is very useful when you debug your code or when you want to show some personal error message. So let's say if some condition, and the condition is when connection is not successful, we want to do something. So here, curly brace, this is if block. So if connection is not successful, we want to do something here. So first, how can we make a condition that stays when current connection is not successful? Yes, we can use our variable con. This con variable will save all the current connection status. So anytime when connection is successful, this con variable will have some values. If it has some values, when we check the logic, it will be considered as true. But if connection is not successful, this con variable will not have any value, or we name it as a null value. Then logically, when we evaluate it, it's going to be considered as false. So if connection is not successful, this highlighted portion will be false. So how can you make it as true inside this parenthesis? We can add not with exclamation mark. So this not means, with con, we can say whenever connection is not successful, this highlighted part will be true, right? So if connection is not successful, what we want to do? We want to show some error message. So here, let's say echo. Echo means we are typing something, or we are showing this on the screen. So echo, then let's add some text. Let's say it's error. And why I add semicolon? Because I want to add some more details. Echo and error, is it enough? So you can close the semicolon? No, we can add some more details. How can we add some more details? We can add additional new function called MySQL connect error. So let me type first MySQL underbar connect underbar error function. So if you call this function, what you can get is you will capture the first error message if connection is not successful. This will be generated by MySQL engine, so database, but you can capture it in PHP code. So let's capture this function's MySQL connect error, and then using this period, we can concatenate this error message with this text part. So if there is any error, you can capture it and you can print out error, and you will show these error messages. So I will demonstrate how it looks like later. So anyway, by doing this, we can capture the error, we can show the error message. That's it. A better way may be, if the connection was not successful, we cannot run this program anymore, right? Therefore, you may want to free all the memory space and you want to just kill this program. In that case, we can call the function called the exit. So only when connection is not successful, we can say there is error message. If a connection is successful, in that case, you will see the blank screen. Temporary, if you want to debug it by showing the status, you can say like that. So show that connection is successful because you did not capture this error on top. That means that now in this line connection is successful. So let's echo connection is successful. However, later I will delete it. after we check that connection is successful. So now let's save it, and I will test it. To test your connection.php code, let's type the URL. So https valhalla-sourcevery.edu tilde. In this case, I add my last name, but again, you will use your last name. And what was our folder? M4T5 T4, and the connection.php. If you have warning message, you can just proceed. Here, I got the warning message. In your case, you may not have this warning message, but if you successfully log in, intentionally, I'm showing this error message. In other words, what this means, I entered intentionally wrong password. By doing this, now there is a warning. MySQL Connect access denied for users. So this is error. And in the second line, look at this. Error and the colon. Who made this error message? Actually, we made it using echo. And it was concatenated with this error message, access denied for user, for this specific user. So this message is captured by which function? MySQL i_connect.error function. So since there is error, the function captured this message, and this error message is generated by MySQL, but it is captured by PHP and it's concatenated with this error text. So by showing this detailed error message, it is very useful for PHP programmers to debug their code. Now let me fix my code by using correct password. Okay, now I fixed my code. So let me refresh it. Okay, so now without any error, you can find the connection is successful message. Since we checked the connection is successful, now we don't need this connection is successful message. So let's block it. Or you can delete it, but you can simply commentize your echo code. So if you do that, if you run this connection.php, you will see just a blank screen without any error message. So if I rerun this one more time, there is no any error message, and it's just a blank screen. So now we are done with this connection.php. So we made a successful connection to the database. This is the first step. So before you complete this connection.php, you cannot move on further. So if there is any error message, please fix it and make sure your connection is okay. And then we will run or execute some SQL.